What's up everyone, Zik here. In this video, we're going to take a look at a chain lightning build for Sorcerer leveling in Season 5. I've played a Sorcerer every season, and this is the most powerful build I have ever leveled with. I usually switch between different builds trying stuff, but this one was so fun, and the leveling was going so fast that I decided to just really hone it in. So in this guide, I'll show you the exact gear, skill order, and Paragon progression to follow in order to squeeze the maximum power out of this build every step of the way. To be clear, this build is not optimized for 100. It is optimized to be as powerful as possible in the progression to 100. There's going to be a more powerful version using Esadors where we switch to Ice Blades and Lightning Spear enchantment, and that is the version of the build that will be more optimized for endgame. As soon as I get Esadors, I'll be making another guide for that endgame version, and that is what I plan to farm my Ubers with this season, so stay tuned for that. So with this build, I jumped to World Tier 3 around level 30 and World Tier 4 right at 50 before using any Paragon points, which is pretty normal for me at this point, but where it really started to come online is once I got to World Tier 4 with these new Axial Conduit pants. It scales from there to the point where I was able to farm Nightmare tier 100s, hit tier 60 plus, and tier 5 Infernal Hordes all before level 100 without any masterworking or crazy gear. At level 99, it was even able to mob pretty well still in pit tier 80, where enemies are level 179, so punching a full 80 levels above my character. Thank God, I feel like I'm playing a real classic. Speaking of crazy gear, the only piece you really need to make this build work are these new unique chain lightning pants called Axial Conduit. I got these out of an early cache from the Mother seasonal rewards, but they are basically essential because they change the way chain lightning functions, and so the rest of the build is designed completely around them. The simplest way I can describe these pants is that they turn you into a chain lightning battery. Your chain lightnings now behave half like chain lightning, half like ball lightning. For half the time, they will seek out enemies and zap them, and the other half, they will return to you and orbit like ball lightning. When a bolt of chain lightning returns to you, it drains mana based on the amount of chain lightnings that are currently active. So the more chain lightnings that are up, the more mana drained when each one returns to your body. After a single bolt of lightning drains 66 total mana in this way, so likely having returned you multiple times draining some portion of that mana each time, it will explode dealing big AoE lightning damage. Now the catch is that chain lightning expires if there's not enough mana for it to drain when it returns to you. So you're essentially having to juggle multiple active chain lightnings and balance them against your mana pool and regeneration, giving you a very interesting new mechanic to think about and master, and making gameplay much more engaging than just spamming chain lightning. In fact, if you just spam chain lightning with this build, it's going to be a big DPS loss. Your max DPS will come from keeping the perfect amount of chain lightnings active while trying to stay close, just like ball lightning, whenever possible. So with this setup specifically, what that's going to look like once you have your aspects online is basically casting Chain Lightning and then casting Spark 2 or 3 times in a row and then casting Chain Lightning again. That's your main rotation that you're going to be doing over and over again, and that's going to make it so you're not casting enough Chain Lightnings to go but you're casting enough to consume a big chunk of your mana. So really the sweet spot where you want your mana in this build is somewhere right in the middle, constantly going up and down but hovering right around the middle. As soon as you go any of the Chain Lightnings you had active are going to expire without dealing that AoE burst, which is a huge portion of the damage with this build. So you really want to keep it right around the halfway point, and it seems like the best way to do that while maximizing damage at the same time is casting Spark 3 times in a row. That's going to get your expectant to 30%, and then throwing a Chain Lightning out with that 30% boost, and then doing 3 more Sparks into another Chain Lightning. And with where our mana is at leveling up, that seems to be a good balance to keep our mana in the right spot while maximizing DPS. Then you're going to basically use your defensive cooldowns when you need them to save yourself, and we are running a Cursed Touch aspect to give us that vulnerability, so anytime you do use a defensive skill, it's going to proc these little ghost dudes that fly out and blast everything, which is always fun. And then you're basically just ulting on cooldown or in big moments, and when you ult with this build, you're pretty much just going to want to only spark because you're going to get automatic chain lightnings coming out anyway. So if you try to chain lightning while you're ulted, not only are you going to go faster because you attack faster, but also it has a 33% chance to cast like an extra chain lightning under it. So I suggest just spamming the crap out of spark, and every third spark you cast is going to get a free chain lightning off of that ult effect anyways. Alright, taking a look at the gear real quick, the main affixes you're going to want to focus on leveling up are really just intelligence and max life. Those are like, even as you're getting close to level cap, those are the top affixes you're going to be looking for a lot of builds. And especially now with the damage equation changing and like crit and vuln buckets having that cap, so the rest of them go into additive. That makes intelligence like more important than ever, and especially with the way we're going to morph this build into using Esadors, we're going to want as much intelligence as possible. So big focus on stacking in with this build, and like I mentioned at the beginning, the main thing you're going to need to make this work is these Axial Conduit pants because of the way they change chain lightning. The other thing that's really interesting about these is they have this added resource generation, and that's going to make a huge difference actually in your mana pool, because it's not only going to scale your mana pool, it's going to scale any generation you have by 30% as well. For boots, Esu's is really good because of the way the move speed scales crit and the way we're getting move speed from some other sources to help scale our crit. This is just like a really good at scaling crit, especially like before endgame when we don't have like really high crit chance. So I really like Essos, but you can definitely run the build without them. So just pick another like mobility aspect here with some like int move speed, you know, max health boots or whatever if you don't have Essos. Take a look at our helm and chest is where we're going to be running our two defensive aspects. So you don't necessarily need these leveling up, especially if you're not trying to push like a really high level above yourself. And so you could switch these to more utility ones if you wanted. But safe bet's going to be ever living and might. And so this is going to basically give us, you know, a 25% damage reduction here and then another 20% damage reduction here. That's basically active all the time. Both these, you're going to be going for int max life. And then on at least one of these, you're going to want to try to snag armor. Again, not as important leveling up, but especially as you're getting close to level cap and looking at 925 gear, one of these slots, you're going to want to try to find an armor roll. And if you're really trying to position yourself for endgame, if you're looking for like that BIS piece, you're probably going to want to try to find a chest piece with that armor roll because your helm is eventually going to be Shaco. And then for the one that's not armor, I really like at least one of these mana per second rolls. With the way this build's working and the way these boost generation, that's actually the generation from that mana per second should be boosted 30% from the conduits. So tempers here aren't crazy important, but we're just going to look for max life and stun duration. So basically on one of these we want stun duration, on one of them we want lucky hit stun, and on the other one we want lucky hit freeze. That's the setup I like. That's the setup I'm going to carry into endgame. Freeze is going to be more important later with the other version where we take this guy, Hoarfrost. But for now, stun would be perfectly fine here too. And then on the piece where you have the armor roll, so either on your head or your chest, on that same piece of armor, I like to do the total armor percentage. And basically what that's going to do is whatever piece you get this armor and armor percentage roll on, as you start to masterwork it up, that combined with skulls in your jewelry is going to bring you to the armor cap pretty easily as you're nearing level cap. Again, not quite as important when you're leveling up though. For gloves, most important thing is going to be ranks to chain lightning. And then secondary importance is going to be crit chance. And this is the only one where intelligence is a bit of a lower prio. But I think ranks to chain lightning and crit strike chance, just because gloves is the only piece of armor you can get crit chance on, I think are really worth trying to snag on gloves. And then if you can get intelligence, that's like the perfect look. And then on a lot of these pieces like this and all your jewelry and your weapons, you're going to be doing the shock finesse temper roll. And there's a couple of options that are going to work there. So the best one's probably going to be the shock critical strike chance, but critical strike damage is also going to work perfectly fine. And lightning damage is also going to work perfectly fine. The ones you don't want are crackling energy damage or teleport damage. So just try to roll the shock finesse till you're getting either shock critical strike chance, shock critical strike damage, or lightning damage. And then we talked about the pants and boots. The most important thing with the pants is trying to get a high roll on the actual unique effect, because the bigger that damage number is, the better it's going to scale. And so, but to be honest, you kind of just got to take what you can get as you're leveling up. And then once you get closer to 100, we can look at farming the tormented bosses. We're going aspect of control on gloves because of how much mobbing we're going to be doing leveling up and how good the 35% multiplier is with how much uptime we have on stunned enemies. All right, for our amulet, we are running the lightning rod aspect and we are giving it the 50% boost for being on amulet because it's going to give us a big extra multiplier on chain lightning. So there's honestly a lot of good options for necklace. Like a lot of these passives would work really good, guys. So if you're wanting to run, you know, like extra glass cannon ranks, extra elemental dominance ranks, a lot of these would work pretty good if you find a necklace with ranks, but a lot of times you don't find that stuff early. So just look for, again, max life. If you find one with a good int roll, that works too. Percent int, although I will say percent int isn't as good until you have a lot of int under it, so it's not going to be as good until later. You're going to find that it's not going to scale your total int value that much. So I would recommend move speed because that's going to scale your crit with Esus, and also you're going to just be trying to zoom when you're leveling, right? And then crit strike chance and max life. I would again try to roll move speed as a temper and then just do the shock finesse one again, looking for crit strike chance, crit strike damage, or lightning damage. For the aspects on our rings, this is where we're going to get a huge chunk of our mana. So we're doing this elemental acuity one. which is basically going to scale your regen based on using different types of spells. So after you use your Frost Armor, your Flame Shield, and then any of your shock spells, you're going to get this maxed out regen. And then we are stacking that with Recharging Aspect, which is just going to give you 3 mana every time Chain Lightning bounces, which is huge. So these two together are really going to carry a big chunk of our mana regen. And then for affixes on both of them, we're just looking for Int and Max Life again, and then Crit Strike Chance. So the places where you can get Crit Strike Chance, which are your rings, your offhand, and your gloves, you're really going to want to look for that wherever you can get it. Crit is going to be huge with this build. The higher we can get our crit, the higher we will be able to push our damage ceiling early. And then for our tempers on rings, we are doing that offensive shock finesse one again, looking for crit chance, crit damage, or lightning damage on both. And then we are doing a resource roll. And I tested a couple different things. I think the best way to go with this actually is to try to roll one of your rings with +2 invigorating conduit. And that's that skill that's going to boost our mana whenever we grab a crackle energy. So that's going to bring this up to 20. And then I was actually trying to run that on both, but I think what feels better is doing this resource generation. So doing invigorating conduit for one of them, and then trying to get resource generation as the mana roll for the second one. And what that's going to do is this 30% increase resource generation from your pants is going to boost this roll by 30%, so you're going to get a couple extra percentage of that. That should let these other ways you're getting mana, like these two aspects and such, scale, as well as scaling this itself, right? Like the generation should make the mana from this go up as well, even though it's not exactly invigorating conduit, right? So then for weapons, for offhand, again, trying to get crit strike chance here, trying to find at least one lucky hit to restore primary resource, I think is good. And then an int roll, and then again, the offensive shock finesse. And to be honest, I actually don't like the way casting Chain Lightning a second time feels on the weapons, because it can make you go accidentally, because you'll only want to be casting one Chain Lightning and it'll cast two, and then you'll go and end up losing your other active Chain Lightnings. And so what I was trying is one chance for Spark to go twice, and then one for Chain Lightning. So basically what this does is, combined with the Chain Lightning roll already on your pants, this had me at like 30% chance to cast an extra Chain Lightning, and this had me at like 30% extra chance to cast a Spark. And I think honestly, I might do both of them Spark in retrospect. Again, I'm not sure how much I like the chain. This is like a preference thing. So if you like Chain Lightning casting twice, if you're finding that's not making you go then roll both of these for extra chance to cast Chain Lightning. But if that's messing with you like it was with me, I would just roll them both Spark. But I kind of have one of each right now, because that's how I was playing it, where I had 30% extra chance for Spark, 30% extra chance for Chain Lightning. But I'm honestly not sure which is better. Just make sure you're not ooming yourself with Chain Lightning is the main thing. And we're going aspect of the expectant here. So like I mentioned earlier, basically you're going to want to try to cast Spark every couple times before Chain Lightning to get that 30% extra damage stack under it. And then for this weapon, we're basically covering our early vulnerability with this aspect. So this is basically just going to give us a much higher chance at making stuff vulnerable early on. And it's also going to give us the cool little ghost explosion effect. But this is basically just carrying our vulnerability. So again, int, max life, and then the third roll could be vuln damage, crit damage, regular damage, really any kind of damage for that third roll would be good. And then the two lightning tempers that we already discussed. For gems, I think you'd be good with Emerald or Sapphire here, either crit damage or vuln damage. I think you're going to have higher uptime on crit, especially if you have Esus, so I would probably run Emerald. For armor guys, if you're looking to max out damage, I would just run Topaz. If you're looking to like punch really high above your level, you can go to Ruby. And so like you'll see me, I was using Ruby in a good chunk of it, but I think you're going to be better off most of the time just running Topaz for the extra int and just give yourself more damage scaling. But if you are trying to push it, feel free to switch that to the max health. I will say the lower your max health pool, like so especially early on, the lower value you're going to get out of this percentage boost, right? So if, like the bigger the total pool, the more that percentage is going to give you. And so another good reason to just run Topaz early. I had this on Ruby before, but I'm going to just leave it Topaz for now. And then for your jewelry, you're going to basically want to do whatever gets you to armor and resistance cap as fast as possible. So armor cap, you're going to be able to get there by doing this thing we talked about, where you get an armor roll on the affix, and then you get an armor temper percentage roll, and then you run skulls in your jewelry. That's going to get you to your armor cap pretty quick. And then we're going to be able to cover a lot of our resistances through our intelligence in our Paragon board. And so you're not going to really have to worry about that, but you can do something like this, you know, where if you're trying to get resistance cap first, you keep a diamond in with 2 skulls or something like that. But basically just rock whatever it takes to try to get to those early. I'm going to leave it at this because I actually did run diamond 2 skulls, and now it felt like balanced for leveling as I was trying to reach both of them at once. All right, guys, for our enchantments, we are running Chain Lightning and Spark. And the main reason we're running Spark, I don't think this is necessarily a great enchantment in general. I think Chain Lightning is actually really good with the way these pants work, though how much mana they drain. You're actually going to get a lot of extra Chain Lightning procs out of running Chain Lightning enchantment. But we really need, because we're running the Destructive Chain Lightning for the extra damage boost under it, we really need this enchantment to get any amount of crackling energy, and we really need some crackling energy to help our mana generation along. And so to me, it felt like this balance between just having 1 point in discharge and then also having spark, we're getting enough crackling energy to do what we want with it. And then when we go to the final build with Esadoras, we're going to actually switch both of these. So this is going to be Ice Blades, this is going to be Lightning Spear, and we're going to go for crazy amounts of crackling energy with Destructive Chain Lightning. And so when you're actually like end game, when you have a really high crit chance, if you switch to this, we're going to lose 30% multiplier here. But just this alone is going to give us so many crackling energies that we're going to get Esadora procs off of that we don't have to worry about crackling energy from any other source. But for leveling, I tried different stuff here, and I just like the way Spark feels, even though I don't think it's like a great enchantment overall. So if you're wanting to try other enchantments, I would switch out Spark, try some different stuff. There's definitely other good options you could go for here. And like, to give you a good example, like just the day after I hit level 100 in this same exact build, I killed Tormented Azir, and all I did was switch this to Firebolt, and then like pulled a couple points out. I think I pulled those two, I pulled these two, and I pulled my ult, and to get Hydra. So Hydra to replace ult for the burn, and then I got pulled like one more out of there, and then 3 to Devouring Blaze. So like that's an easy swap if you want to go for like more of a single target DPS look. All you got to do is drop ult for Hydra, get the Hydra burn, and then pull a couple points out of Devastation and Lucky Hit to lock in these 3 out of 3 Devouring Blaze. And so like that's a good like boss killer variation if you're looking to, you know, like try to do some of the early tormented bosses like Azir, Grigor, Varshan. I think you can do this build like right after you hit 100 if you switch to more of a look like this. Hydra's just OP against bosses. All right, so now let's take a look at the skills, and I'm going to go through not only the skill order, but also why I'm using some of these things. And I think if you understand my logic behind why I'm taking stuff, it's going to enable you to use the skills better yourself. So starting off with Spark, Spark is our generator. You're going to get this Enhanced Spark second, and this is basically going to just make it so it splits, turns into a bit more of an AoE cleave. And then third point, we're just going to grab our first one in Chain Lightning, and then we're going to go enhanced Chain Lightning and then greater Chain Lightning. This is just to really max out our Chain Lightning damage for this build. And then right after that, we're going to grab the last upgrade for Spark, which is Glinting Spark. And this is going to really help our mana generation along. See how it says at max stacks, your Spark hits grant 1 mana. So not only is this going to give us 8% free crit basically all the time, but because of this, when there's more than one mob, it's hitting 4 times. So every Spark cast, you're going to get 4 mana from Glinting Spark. From there, we're going to go grab our first point in all our defensives. So we're just going to grab 1 in Teleport, 1 in Ice Armor, 1 in Flame Shield, and then 1 in Elemental Attunement. And that's going to give us just this chance to reset all these. And then Enhanced Teleport, this is going to give us move speed for zooming along while leveling. And then we're going to go 1 in Align the Elements just to get this active damage reduction started. And then back up here to Glass Cannon, we're going to max out Glass Cannon next for that extra damage. Then we're going to finish Teleport, and this one we're going to start Mystical Teleport early. This is just going to help our damage along as well as our crackling energy generation. But as soon as you're getting to any sort of content where it's getting more challenging, I suggest switching this to Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction. So when I was probably around level like 70 or so, when I was trying to really start to push, I switched this to Shimmering. All right, and that's going to give us enough points to access our Mastery Tree. So we're going to get our first point in Static Discharge. That's just going to give us the chance to get a free Crackling Energy active. And then we are going to get mana regen from our ice armor here at the next level. Then from there, we're going to go 3 in invigorating conduit. So we're looking to just pump our mana regen here, getting this ice armor upgrade, and then getting this to give us mana off of our crackling energy. Then we're going to go throw 2 more points into chain lightning. That's going to bring it to rank 3. And then that's going to give us just enough points to activate unstable currents. So we're going to go unstable currents with prime unstable currents. We don't really need this last point. I think it's better spent elsewhere. If you like this final upgrade of the ult, you can definitely just go ahead and snag it and take a point off anywhere else. And then right after ult, we are grabbing just 1 in coursing currents. And again, this is just to activate this. So this is going to give us this 1% scaling crit chance every time we land a lightning spell. And then we're going to come back up and finish our defensives. So we're going to go Enhanced Flame Shield into Mystical Flame Shield. This is going to give us like a nice big stun that I think is actually like a bit underrated and really good for mobbing. And if you chain lightning right after that, it's going to be guaranteed crit on that chain lightning. Then we're going to finish our ice armor with Shimmering Ice Armor. Because we're spending so much mana, this one synergizes pretty well with this build where we're going to get ice armor active a lot more just from this upgrade. Then we're going to finish chain lightning. So now we're going to bring chain lightning to rank 5 from rank 3. We're also going to put our first point into devastation, and that is to start elemental dominance. And so we're going to go 1 in devastation, 1 in elemental dominance, and that's going to give us our 34 points to where we can get our keystone. So right after that, we're going to grab Veer's Mastery as soon as we can. And they rework this to where it's actually like so strong now. It's way better than it used to be, in my opinion. And so basically what it does is it gives you the damage reduction that it used to when you critical strike, but then on top of that, it's going to give a 10% chance to cause damage to arc as lightning damage to another nearby target. And if there is no nearby target, you hit the target again for 250% of the damage. So big multiplier there. So right after we grab Veers, we're coming back up, going to finish Elemental Dominance to have it maxed out. Because of how much mana regen you have and how we're trying to cast Chain Lightning every couple sparks, you should almost always have Elemental Dominance active when you cast Chain Lightning. Next, we are going to go for big move speed. If you don't have Esus, then this might not be as valuable at this point, but especially if you have Esus at this point in the game, taking these 3 in conduction is just going to help you zoom along. It's also going to help your crit chance from Esus scaling it. And then because of what we talked about with the Axial Conduit pants, I think it's actually worth building your mana pool out a little bit more because this extra 6 you're going to get from these extra 2 ranks in Devastation is going to be scaled by 30% or more from the pants, right? And so this is actually going to result in much more than 9 extra mana. And it's weird, you actually have to go out like in the world in combat for that to work. Like if you're standing in town, you're not going to be able to see that extra scaling from the Axial Conduits. You have to actually like walk out of town for some reason, and then you'll see your mana pool like jump up. It's strange. Okay, so next we're going for our stun. So we're going to go 3 points in Convulsions, and then we're going to go 3 points right after that in Shocking Impact. And I don't think these are really worth getting until you just like max both of them out. So we're just going to wait to get any points in any of them, and then we're going to max 3 in this, max 3 in this, just to get them online together. Then we're going to go 3 in Electrocution. This is the point in the game where damage scaling is going to start becoming a little more important, probably as we're getting into World Tier 4. For the same reasons, we are going to start investing some points into Protection and Mana Shield. So I just go 1 in Protection first to start it working, then 3 in Mana Shield to max it out, and then the 2 more in Protection to finish it off, and then last 2 points in Precision Magic. And so if you were wanting to try points anywhere else or do anything, I would pull these last 2 out of Precision Magic and redistribute them elsewhere. And if you need 2 more, I'd pull those out of Devastation, so that's 4 more to work with. And then you could pull some of these out if you don't need the defensives early as well. And that's to do stuff like I mentioned earlier, like if you're wanting to switch to the boss killing version and do Hydra, you know, couple points out of Precision Magic, couple points out of Devastation, couple points out of the ult. That's 6 points now, and maybe we need 7, so we go 1 out of Protection, right? And then we can do Hydra with a burn and 3 in Devouring Blaze. And maybe we need, you know, 1 more point to get Firebolt, and then we switch this to Firebolt. And now all of a sudden we are in, you know, like more single target version of the build, less like lightning cleave, more like single target burn damage. All right, now let's take a look at the Paragon boards, and I'm for sure going to get questions about why I'm only running 5 boards, and I'm doing this for a very good reason. I completely understand the way Paragon boards work in this game. I've designed a bunch of them at this point for a bunch of different builds, and so this is more of like an end game Paragon board setup that we would look at 7 boards, 2 legendary nodes, 7 glyphs, right? But the reason this is not good for leveling up is because you literally need to be level 100 for this to work. You need all of your Paragon points for this to be effective. For this stretching the value all the way to the glyphs to get these extra multipliers, you're wasting not getting upfront value here. All these spots where you could get immediate value, you are foregoing that to try to stretch the distance of your board. See how we're getting like no special nodes basically in any of these. We're just pathing. We're doing that specifically for these glyph multipliers. Well, the reality is these glyph multipliers don't even work until the glyphs are level 15. So if you haven't farmed your Nightmare tier dungeons to level 7 glyphs to 15, this strategy is going to be ineffective. On top of that, the multiplier values themselves are going to be less effective the lower item level your gear is. So because your total base statistics and your total damage is going to be lower as you're leveling up, 10% is going to give you less total value than 10% would give you if you have a huge amount of stats loaded into your endgame gear. And so the actual multipliers themselves are going to give you less total value than they would at endgame when you have all these attributes stacked. So rather than starting with an endgame strategy that only becomes truly effective when you're already level 100, let's start with a leveling strategy that maximizes the absolute power we get along the way instead of trying to stretch our power to some future point when we can simply just rearrange the entire board once we hit 100. So be more effective for leveling up and then be just as effective when we hit 100 because we just rearrange a few things, right? And so for this, it's literally just moving these two boards and rearranging the 3 right here. So that ends my Paragon board tangent. I have a lot more to say on that probably, but this is my basically power loaded 5 board strat specifically for leveling, right? So let's go through it. We're going to start out here and we're going to grab all this juice, baby. So we're going to come up to our first socket. We're going to get Enchanter there. Enchanter is going to be the first glyph you're going to want to be pumping levels into. As soon as you get this into 15, if you get these surrounding int nodes like this, you can path back down here, get all this extra resistance and life up here, and you're going to have a fully juiced at level 15 with 70 int. This is going to give you 106% non-physical damage, and that's going to do absolute wonders to scale your Frigid Fate node because we are not building cold damage, right? So then we're pushing up from here into my favorite board of all time, Enchantment Master. If you guys have followed my channel, Enchanter glyph and Enchanter board just like this I am in love with. So we're coming up here and we're going to grab Control, and this is just, I actually don't have this glyph in the end game version. I think this is a very, very strong early game glyph if you're playing anything with stun or freeze. And so I think with lightning builds, early Control is actually really, really strong. So we're going to path up, grab this chunk of non-physical to dex, grab this resistance, and then up, and we're going to get all this juicy non-physical. So much health non-physical, elite damage non-physical. So between this board, we're going to get over 100% easily non-physical. And that again is going to juice our Frigid Fate node. So coming from there over into the Static Surge board, we're really trying to just max out our raw damage values. And in Static Surge, there's big multipliers for stunned and elite. So we're getting big chunk of stunned elite damage here into this legendary node to help with our vulnerability and our mana, which actually is pretty good with this build. Then over and down into this glyph node area, which we are going with destruction for our third glyph. We're going to try to max it out with as much. We're going to get this nice clean dex path where we can grab this chunk with all this dex and then this dex down here. Down here, this extra mana right here along with the stun damage is actually going to scale really well. So just these things, these 3 mana nodes combined with the 3 in devastation, with this effect on the Axial Conduit pants for the extra resource generation is actually going to make our mana pool like really big with just those things without like anything else on top of it. So from there, we're coming down into Frigid Fate. We're going to grab all this juice for Vuln damage and damage reduction from Vuln into this socket where we're actually going with Unleash. And the cool thing you can do here, guys, is you don't need to level this one up at all. So at level 1 here, if you can imagine this radius going down, so bring the red border down a level, like to where it's pretend it's level 1. You're not going for this bonus effect. All you need is the additional bonus online, and this is actually wrong. Like what it's reading here, this glyph is updated in game to where it's going to give you 25% mana regeneration. It's going to give you 8% increased damage multiplier and 25% mana regeneration. And so this is actually really good with this build. And if you do this setup right here, this is 40 int within the level 1 range. So like once you get it to level 15, you could take this int away and see how it'll still be active with 40 int. But the only int that's out of its range is this one here. So if we just snag this extra one, if you lower the range by 1, like if you bring this glyph to level 1, it'll still be active with the 40 int. So that's just Pog way to bring that online. That's really going to help our min out. Then we are coming down and grabbing the Frigid Fate node, and that's going to be scaled really well by all this non-physical we're stacking here. Okay, so from there we're coming down, grabbing just this extra little bit of vulnerability, and then we are coming into Ceaseless Conduit. We're going to come over to the socket, get exploit, and then come down, get this extra lightning and crackling energy damage over to Ceaseless Conduit. And right around there is when you're going to be hitting level cap. But I was able to kill Tormented Lord Zir with this setup exactly, and just switching those little things I showed you guys where I just moved that stuff to Hydra earlier. But so yeah, this is basically the power loaded 5 board setup. And once you're getting down here to this final node and you're getting some levels under these glyphs to where they're online, that's the point where I would recommend switching to more of an end game looking setup where you're extending out to a couple more boards, a couple more glyphs. But I would honestly chill in this setup until you have the glyphs leveled. So like, chill in a setup like this, get these glyphs online to 15, except Unleash. You can just leave this one level 1. And then level these other glyphs that you're going to need for this setup, right? And then switch to this setup. And that's going to like really maximize your power curve to where you don't have some weird drop off or weird scaling issue. Basically, the goal is to be as powerful as possible the entire way through. And that's the whole reason I'm making a leveling guide and not just like an end game build guide, right? I hope all that made sense. This is going to be the version of the build with Essadoras, which is my next video coming in just a few days. I was able to get Essadoras from Lord Zir yesterday, I think, and so that build's looking pretty juicy. Really excited to bring you guys this one pretty soon. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. I thank you so much for watching. Remember to take care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.